Hi, my name is Saddam Hussain. I welcome you once again to Cbse Board Economics. Today we are discussing the last method of measuring national income or national product. We have already seen the other two methods, that is, one was a product method or value added method. The second was income method. And the last method we have is expenditure method. Mind it, by all the three methods, you get the same value or same national income. Because whatever the amount or the value of goods and services produced in the economy is equal to the income generated, which is equal to the expenditure. What it means, when we produce the goods, we are generating income, and the same income we spend it in buying the same goods and services in the economy. That's why the answer will remain the same. Suppose we produced goods worth 100. Of course, income is generated. A penny of goods produced is equal to a penny of income generated. The generation of income is 100. That will be equal to the expenditure. Now let's go to the expenditure method. That was an intro. In expenditure method, is estimate the total expenditures in the economy on GDP at market price. The total expenditure. Why? Because we produce the GDP. When we produce gross domestic product in the economy, this includes a lot of things, all kinds of goods and services in the economy, in terms of cars, in terms of pens, in terms of computers, mobile phones, the services of doctors, teachers, lawyers, and all. This is GDP. So obviously we generated income worth 100. This income is spent by people to buy the same GDP. So that's why we get GDP at market price. So we find out the total expenditures on gross domestic product at market price. What do you mean by total expenditures on GDP? See, the total expenditure, what we do one by one we discuss. One is private final consumption expenditure. We call it as C, private or personal final consumption expenditure. This is mostly done by households. Whatever you are buying at home, it can be in terms of vegetables, it can be in terms of fruits, it can be in terms of bread, it can be in terms of car you are buying from home, it can be computers, it can be laptops, it can be micro-ovens, whatever you're buying for home. That comes to private final consumption expenditure. Of course, in this we include even the non-profit institutions serving households. So private final consumption expenditure is just done by the households for consumption purposes. Then the second expenditure will be obviously for investment. This is done by the firms in buying buildings, in buying structures, in buying machines. That is called investment expenditure. I, we call it C plus I. In economics, we can call it also as gross domestic capital formation, GDCF, gross domestic capital formation. It has two components that we'll be discussing later. You get confused here. Gross domestic capital formation right now you remember as investment expenditure. So either expenditures are done in the economy for consumption or they are done for investment. Firms invest it, households spend it for consumption. And the next one is, we are left out with one more sector. This is the household sector, this is the firms, and now we have government sector. Government final consumption expenditure. This is done by the government. What does the government does? They provide you roads, street lighting, parks, defense, law and order, hospitals. Of course, that's all for the consumption of the public. They provide you public goods. The government spends money, government final consumption. This we write it as G. So we write it as C plus I plus G. And the last one, we spend money when we import goods from other countries. When we export, we get it. That's why we write it as net exports. Net exports is exports minus imports. When you export, we are getting money. When you import, you are spending money. So we take the difference, net exports, that we write it in economics as X minus M. X stands for exports, M stands for imports. So C plus I plus G plus X minus M will give you GDP at market price. So I repeat once again. So in the expenditure method, we take the total expenditures on GDP at market price, which are these. Number one, private final consumption expenditure. This is done by the households on all kinds of consumer goods. Number two, investment expenditure. This in economics we call it as gross domestic capital formation, GDCF. This is done by the firms on all kinds of machine, building, structure. The third one is government final consumption expenditure, is done by the government in providing you hospitals, schools. And the last one is net exports, X minus M, net exports, X minus M. There is nothing else. All the expenditures have been taken care of in the economy in these four terms, C plus I plus G plus X minus M. That will be your total expenditures of the economy on our GDP. So when you add up all these things, you get GDP at market price. From GDP at market price, let's come back to our other formulae. If you subtract depreciation, that is consumption of fixed capital, you get NDP at market price, net domestic product at market price. From NDP at market price, by subtracting once again NIT, net indirect taxes, you get, that is indirect taxes minus subsidies, you get NDP at factor cost, which is nothing but domestic income. So to this domestic income or NDP at factor cost, if you add an FIA, net factor income from abroad, that's the difference between factor income received and factor income paid to abroad, you get an NP at factor cost or national income. That's as simple as that. That's the expenditure method. I repeat again, in case of expenditure method, simply remember this way, we take the total expenditures on GDP at market price, which are these total expenditures on GDP at market price. There are four of them. Remember this way, C plus I plus G plus X minus M. C stands for consumption expenditure or private final consumption expenditure. This is done by the households on all kinds of consumption goods. And next one is investment expenditure, or we call it as GDC, or gross domestic capital formation. This is done by the firms on all kinds of investment. The next one is G. G stands for government expenditure on hospitals, roads, for welfare of the people. And the last one is net exports, X minus M. When you add up all these expenditures, C plus I plus G plus X minus M, you get GDP at market price. From GDP at market price, by subtracting depreciation, you get NDP at market price. By subtracting NIT, you get NDP at factor cost, which is nothing but domestic income. To this, you add NFI, net factor income from abroad, you get NNP at factor cost or national income. I'm 100% sure you must have followed the expenditure method, which is much simpler compared to the other three methods. That's all we have time for today. Till we meet next time, so goodbye from Saddam Hussein. Best of luck for exams. Don't forget to subscribe, share, comment and like. Bye.